So, welcome to Screenaholics, episode 10, with our guest, Helen Dittmer, mother, librarian, professor, researcher, teacher, aunt, great aunt, and great aunt. And I decided to sit down with my mom and make the theme her life through reading, because she has made no secret of the fact that books are very important to her, and I think she has a lot to say about it. And I think you'll enjoy the interview with her, talking about all the the many things that she read over the course of her life that influenced her or left a lasting impression on her. I can think already. The questions I should have asked are flooding in. That'll have to wait till next time. But it was a lot of fun to sit down with her. Always is. Great to have you listening. Thank you to my thank you to my subscribers. My subscribers, the family of Screenaholics. You've admitted that you're a screenaholic, and look what's happened as a result. You have clips like this flowing into your YouTube algorithm stream. This is, as like all our meetings are, this is an open meeting of screenaholics. If you know someone who might be a screenaholic, forward this to them, or maybe mention this to them. It's not for you to tell them that they are a screenaholic. They should figure out themselves. So do not secretly click subscribe on somebody else's account. Only screenoholism should be self-diagnosed. And here you are. Your screen time, as we speak, your screen time is increasing. Your app will tell you later that you spent more time on the internet. Again, you did it. But at least now we have a community of screenaholics, and thanks for being a part of that. And I'll keep we'll keep on helping each other out through this as 2024. This is the first episode of 2024, and hopefully the first of many. And or not, but hopefully it's a great year for all of us. Thanks, seriously, everyone, for listening and watching and interacting with me on this platform. And I hope you enjoy this episode. All right, take care.
I actually came from a family where there were no books in the house. I guess you could say when my brothers started school. Then books started to come to the house, but we had no money, so there was no money to buy books. Anyway, I don't know when I started reading books, but I learned very early that books were the most wonderful method of escape available. You got a book and you were in a totally different world. And the world I was living in was not a great world. It was a hard world. My father worked incredibly hard at the stockyards. Closer? My mother, was just learning to speak English. My father never learned English as well as my mother did. She got to take lessons at the local YMCA. And then I had a sister who was disturbed, and I had two brothers who were working hard in their own little way to try and make it in this country.
Oh, this is you're painting a good picture of your family when you got in here. So what year was this, and what?
I guess 44 or 45 would be when I was starting to learn to read. 45, I was 6 years old. So by then, maybe I was reading a little bit. But by about 47, 48, we were going to the library. We discovered the library where I could go and get books for free. And I did. We went all the time to a library that was pretty distant from our house, and I couldn't go by myself. But my mother would take me there. And I would get books. I started out with books The ones I remember were these Betsy Tacy books, which nobody reads anymore, by some author named Lovelace. And then after that...
Oh, Betsy Tacy's the name of the character.
Yeah.
Okay.
Two of them, Betsy and Tacy. And then I read these books about Sue Barton, local nurse, national nurse, hospital nurse, or something like that. So I thought for a long time I was going to be a nurse. I could be as much a nurse as I could be president of the United States, let me tell you. And then after that, let's see. I read the
I think you'd make an excellent
books.
president of the United States, for the record.
You're very nice. You don't really mean that. Let's see what else. I read all those. Well, early on, I guess before, maybe at the same time as Betsy Tacy, I read all the Hardy Boy books and all the Nancy Drew books.
Oh, really?
And it was totally heaven because there never seemed to be an end to them. I mean, there were hundreds of them.
You didn't tell me that when I was reading them growing up that you'd read all of them. That
Well, I didn't remember what they were about. But I know about. I knew about.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, at that age, I don't know. Like, you're just reading to kind of to read, right?
Well, I was reading because it was a totally different world. Totally different world. Reading. I love reading about a totally different world, and I did it whenever I could. So that was early reading, and that probably got me through 6th grade.
So, you were born in 1939,
yeah.
And your parents had been in the country how many months before you got here, or before you were born?
They got here in June, and I was born the following.
June of 1938. Okay,
38, yeah.
And you were born in January 1939. And when do you think? And wait a minute. Let me just figure out some ages. So I know that by that time your mother was 40 and your dad was 45, and your brothers were how old when you were born?
Wally was 9 and a half. And Herb was 14 and a half or 15. 23, 39. He was
okay.
15.
And then Irene must have been about 12?
No, she was 1 year.
Oh, she was younger than Herb. Okay, 14 or 13. Okay. Okay, and where? So at first, I mean, I guess you wouldn't remember the first couple years. Well, what's your? I mean, this is getting away from our topic of literature, but what's your first memory? Can you remember anything from? Do you remember what's your first memory period?
Oh, I don't know if I could do that. I remember that there was a little boy who lived we lived on the 3rd floor of what my brother called a tenement building. And on the 2nd floor lived this other little boy, Ronnie, who was 2 years younger than I. And I remember we would walk, just down the street to the park together. The park was far away. It must have been just down the street because Mother would never let me go very far when I was under 6. I remember that. What else do I remember? I remember actually being held by my mother at the window, to watch if my father came home from the bus. Because he took a bus to stuff. So he came back down Kenwood Avenue, and I would watch him.
You see him get off the bus?
No, you couldn't see that far. You could see him coming. So.
Oh, walking from the bus stop.
Right.
Did he wear a hat, like a bowler hat or anything? Like?
Not a bowler hat. I mean, this was really a rugged job.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if he wore a hat.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
But that is when the boys were in school. The books gradually came into the house, and at some point, maybe when I was in 4th grade or 3rd grade, Wally bought an encyclopedia. We never had an encyclopedia, but some store had one of those little sales on encyclopedias. Got 24 volumes for $15 or $10 or something.
Sure.
And he brought it in. It meant that I didn't have to go to the library to do research. I could do it right at home. I thought that was fabulous.
Maybe when you were in 2nd grade or 3rd grade, you think? Okay. And so he was probably a senior or something like that, or he was about to leave for college. And
he didn't leave for college. Nobody in my family.
That's right. He stayed for college. Okay. Wait. So maybe ask about your first memory. Is it like I was trying to think also then what's your first memory of English? Like, because I imagine that your family only slowly started taking in English, but then again, by the time you're coming online, and so just at like age 4 or 5, there's probably some English already happening. So your first language is German, but very, very early you're learning English. So were any of these books in German, or are these all?
No books in German. No books in German. My first language was German, and I spoke it for a long time. At 4, I went to a nursery school. I don't know where my parents got the money for that, but we went to a nursery school nearby. And so there I only spoke English.
Oh, okay. So at school, all interesting. And also, I mean, I guess I'm pointing out, like, well, sorry to interrupt, but English would be your first written language.
Right.
Okay.
Right. That's right.
Okay.
One of the saddest things is that I lost all my German. Of course, I'm sure I did it deliberately. I'm sure I said, I'm going to get rid of this language just the way the Germans got rid of us.
Yeah.
But it's a shame because I really wish I'd kept the language. I took French when I went to high school. What a stupid, irrelevant language to take, you know? Either you take Latin or you take German, or Spanish at least.
Well, that's what you I'm sure you influenced me toward taking Spanish instead of French.
Well, but we lived in California by the time you came on. There was
a
reason. In Chicago, there was no reason to learn Spanish either.
Right.
You know, you learn. No, it's too late. I've lost it.
So it's your first intellectual regret.
Yes, that's right. But I didn't come to me until I was much older. I was too stupid to have that intellectual regret when I was in high school or college.
Okay, so you went to nursery school. You're speaking English there, and then you're age 5 and 6 and 7, and you're starting to read. But you're learning to read English about as quickly. Like, you're pretty quickly caught up to American kids.
Yeah.
It's not like your reading ability pretty much as good as or better than a lot of the kids your age. And so you're reading. So you got an encyclopedia and Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew. So you're learning to read. You're reading fast. That's okay. So what was the first? So then, how did you mature as a reader? What came next? Let's keep going.
Well, the books that I mentioned, and these are all books I just wanted to read. I can't remember if we read books in school. We had books read to us, wonderful books like Mary Poppins. I remember my 3rd grade teacher read Mary Poppins, and I thought it was heaven, just heaven. The whole idea of Mary, of course, it still is heaven. Everybody feels that way. I don't know what we read in high school. We got to high school. I know we had to read a Shakespeare. Was it Julius Caesar? Probably Julius Caesar. I thought it was interesting. It didn't set me off to read Shakespeare, though. I didn't go home and immediately jump into Lady Macbeth.
Mm-hmm.
And by high school, I was also reading more things that were, like on the bestseller list. Like there was a book called Advise and Consent. It was all about corporate trials. I read that.
Like a John Grisham of that day, kind of.
Yeah, probably. Probably. I can't remember who wrote it.
I'll look it up.
And then, of course, you read Gone with the Wind. I mean, that was wonderful. And my God.
Were you reading it before the movie came out? I guess it would.
I
probably.
Didn't know that.
Maybe the movie was older. The movie is what
I have no
had already
idea.
been made.
I have no idea. All I know is I read the book before I saw the movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. And do you remember?
I can't remember the movie very well, except for Clark Gable.
But it didn't hinder your enjoyment of the movie that you'd read the book.
Oh no, it doesn't. And the books the movie's never as good as the book. Whatever you imagine Rhett Butler to look like, or whatever you imagine Leslie Howard, I can't remember the role he played, but whatever you imagine, the person who played it never lived up to it, except Leslie Howard did. He was really good. Anyway, what other books was I reading? I just can't remember.
Well, in high school is kind of almost a fallow period for a lot of readers. Like, there's a lot of assigned reading in school, and therefore people's enjoyment of reading tends to slow down. Did that happen to you? Like, I mean, you remember when I was like kids my age in high school were starting to like, oh, I don't read at all, or
Oh, it hurts me when you say that.
Right.
I can't stand it.
But you don't.
No, when we were in high school, I mean, books were just wonderful. They were absolutely wonderful. I'm trying to think of how much I loved them. Of course,
as mechanisms of escape.
They were escape, but they were introductions to such. I was thinking one of the things I read in high school, because I was influenced by my brothers and by Elsa. Elsa gave me my first book of my own. I remember.
Elsa, for anybody watching, is your oldest brother's wife.
Yeah.
Who would
and
have
they
come
got
into your
married
life
when I was 9.
Okay, so she was.
And I think maybe when I was 10, she gave me a book called Delara, which is written by the same person who wrote Rebecca. Pretty sure that's right. But anyway, she gave me that. But I started reading Dickens, and I loved Dickens. I loved Oliver Twist. I loved David Copperfield. What I really loved, and I still to this day, I think I should read it again, is A Tale of Two Cities. I mean, that was the most romantic, vividly historical fiction book I've read ever until then. And it's just such a great book. The end of it, when he says, this is a far, far better thing I do than I will ever have done. This is a far, far better place I go to. I mean, he's about to go to get killed. I mean, it's a fabulous book. And this, there are just so many authors out there to read. They were amazing.
Well, so you think that maybe that was the first of the classics that you got into, like the first author, like first great author, maybe that you
maybe. I'm trying to remember if I read Rebecca, but I can't remember. But the other thing I read earlier, and this was back in 5th and 6th and 7th grade, I read all the Louisa May Alcott books, Little Women, Little Men, Joe's Boys. I mean, I thought that was fabulous. And so maybe after that would be like middle school. Well, we didn't have middle school. When I was in school, it was K through 8. But when I got to high school, I could read things like Jane Eyre and Pride and Prejudice. I didn't enjoy them as much then as I would many, many years later when I read them again. But they were and they were all escape, because then none of these people had problems like I had problems, unless maybe you could look at Oliver Twist. But I obviously wasn't in the streets begging, So if I identified with him, it was really a stretch. It was a stretch.
So I'm also, I mentioned kids in my generation growing up in high school and saying they don't read, but I'm thinking, and I ask you about your high school experience, but I remember one thing about your high school experience is, didn't you go through, is that when you skipped grades? Did you skip grades in high school?
No, elementary school.
Okay, so you did 4 years of high school.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Because, but you were done with high school at what age?
17 and 8.
Were you younger than most of the kids? No, you weren't.
My friend Susie was
the same age as you.
I was 17 in January, graduated in June. She was 17 the following September. I'm not sure she was the youngest in the class, though. When we got to high school, the youngest kid in the class was Herbie Hancock, who was much younger. Yeah, I don't know if he was a year younger than she was.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how he did.
And you're talking about the famous musician Herbie Hancock.
Yeah. He was, by the way, voted the most likely to succeed. And guess what?
He did.
He did.
Yeah, that's something. He was the youngest in your grade. How many kids were in that school with you? Like, how big was
high
this?
School?
Yeah.
The high school, I think, had 3,000 kids.
So quite a few. So you didn't know every kid. Yeah, there's 750 kids in your class.
Well, 600.
But you did happen to know Herbie Hancock.
Oh, yeah, we were friends. He was a fine kid.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Arrogant, not filled with hubris. But he knew it. He was creative and successful and warm and generous. And he loved his music.
Did he play? So he played multiple instruments at the time, or
all we knew about was the piano.
Oh, he was a piano player. Okay. Yeah. I wonder. So he read music in addition to whatever reading assignments he was doing for school.
And he was probably writing music at the time, but we wouldn't know that.
And okay, so those are some of your favorite books in high school. And anything else about high school we should include in this
not that I can
literature retrospective.
Right now. I can't remember right now.
So let's we can always go back. So let's press forward. So then you go to college. You get a scholarship.
College. That's right.
You go to University of Chicago.
Yeah, I want to point out that I would never have gone to the University of Chicago if it weren't for my brother Wally, who went to law school there, and he must have been in law school. I graduated in 1952. No, it doesn't say very much. Anyway, he was the one who told me that when there was an exam for the University of Chicago, I should take it. Otherwise, I don't think I would have even known that there was an exam that I could take. But I did take the exam, and it got me into the University of Chicago with some money. They gave a lot of money in those days.
By that time it must have been 56. So you said he graduated law school in 52.
Right, and I went into college in 56.
Okay. Was he still living with you at that? Like when did he move out? That was
from 52 to 53. He went to Israel for a year. He graduated law school in 52. Went to Israel for 52 to 53. He was at Queen Elizabeth's coronation.
Oh yeah,
people outside in the crowds, not inside anymore.
So I guess you're getting. It sounds like you're getting English. It's not like English that your brothers needed to bring in books to you so that you could get them. Like you were getting you were getting books. You're going to the library. You had a lot of sources of books. So your brother Walt, your brother Herb, but also plenty of other.
I must say something else.
Good.
About books. Herb got married in 48, so he left. And I don't know. I mean, I knew it was going. I remember reading books in his own place for his kids, but Wally had books in the house, paperbacks. I don't know. He had jobs. He always had jobs from the time he got to this country, and he made money, and so he had paperback books, and so that was a whole source of reading for me that was way above my understanding level, but it was there. So that's the first time I read James Baldwin. Go Tell It on the Mountain is the book I remember, but there are others. And there was somebody who wrote about Greek gods that he had all these books, and I thought they were just terrific. I should ask him, but he's not alive anymore, so I can't ask him. But it was a exposure to a whole bunch of other books that I wouldn't have come across if they weren't in the next room.
Okay.
And he didn't mind that. He didn't mind anybody else reading his books.
So then there's not like a huge. You nor he did you guys move when you went to college? So high school becomes college, but this story doesn't change drastically with the way. Except I suppose you have more reading assignments in college. Did you have a major right away? Did you?
No.
Okay. And so you're taking general education classes. Did you have any
favorite classes?
Yeah.
Well, the best class I took there were two classes that were really wonderful.
Yeah.
One was Social 1, which was nothing but American history, but it was a really wonderful intro into American history. It was all original documents, and we never did that. We used to read textbooks in high school. Read the textbook, read chapter 11, and answer the questions at the end of the textbook, right? Which, that's really dull. That's one way to really ruin it. But this other class at the university was terrific. And then the best class I took probably was something called History of Western Civ, which is, of course, out now because, you don't just teach Western Civ. It just pushes colonialism and all that kind of stuff. But the class was just marvelous. And it started with the Greeks and the Hebrews, and it moved on from there. And you stopped at Jesus Christ, and then went on from there to Constantinople and the church. And who was that guy? There's a famous churchman who wrote something called City of God.
No, I don't know.
I don't know, but he's very famous.
Augustine or something?
Augustine.
It is Augustine. Okay.
We read these things that just highlighted, Western Civ in a way nothing else could. Did we read part of the Peloponnesian Wars by Thucydides? I can't remember. It seems like we would have, but I'm not sure. Anyway, it was one of the best courses I ever read. I guess it's what made me a history. Those two courses made me a history major.
Oh, that was you. That was eventually your major. Yeah, that's right. Wait, but it wasn't.
It was a double major because I had education and history.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so was that the beginning of you being interested in nonfiction? Would you say I guess history is like some of the best nonfiction you're reading.
Right. I still preferred fiction, though. I've always preferred fiction.
Yeah.
But history always surprises me. Or nonfiction surprises me, too. Last year, I read this book by this guy Levitsky called, where is that book? Why Democracies Fail. It was terrific. It was absolutely a wonderful book. So I'm always surprised when I read a nonfiction book that really gets to me.
So one thing that's sort of surprising to me, I guess, because I picture you when you've read to me as a kid, when I was a kid, you read to a lot of students. Some fast forwarding ahead, but sort of just to go back, Grandma Tony, I don't picture her reading to you.
No, she never did. They were not big readers.
Okay.
The big readers were the two guys, Herb and Wally, who read enormous amounts. But my parents didn't. Now, if there had been German books around, would they have read? I don't know.
Right. Perhaps, probably, yeah.
Well, if they'd really wanted, we were not a family of intellectuals. That doesn't mean we weren't smart. You know, that my father wasn't smart, my mother wasn't smart. It's just that they just didn't have the skills to allow them to go into intellectual things, and they didn't have the time. They didn't even think of it.
Right. Yeah, I'll buy that. Yeah. So, and do you remember teachers reading to you?
Oh, I told you.
Oh yeah, there was one.
Mary Poppins.
Mary Poppins. Yeah.
I can't remember other stuff they did. They read to us, and it was wonderful. It was always the 15 minutes before school ended.
Oh, really?
I really hated school to end because the bell rang and then you couldn't hear anything.
Oh, that's well.
But that didn't go on, which I don't think that went on after 5th grade. I don't think anybody read to us, which is a mistake. I suggest all teachers should read to their kids.
Yeah.
Find something that really hooks them, and not Moby Dick. That wouldn't hook them. Anyway.
Well, a lot of study groups do reading. You pass the reading around. You read a paragraph and the next person reads and the next person reads. Do you have you been in any classes like that, or?
Maybe early, but it really depended on who was reading, whether you paid attention.
Yeah.
If you had a good reader, you paid attention. If you had a rotten reader, you stopped paying attention.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Some kids were wonderful at it. No, they were.
I mean, I guess part of what makes it maybe an actor is largely a good reader, because you're just reading your lines, or maybe.
Acting was not part of the curriculum where I went to school.
No. Not where I went either. Although I guess there were probably classes one could have taken. Theater.
That's right.
So they had that at the University of Chicago.
Not that I knew
of. You're a good reader, but you don't want to be on stage particularly.
That's right.
Although, I mean, is that never? Where do you think? Why do you think that? I mean, I'll move on to keep this on the books theme. But any thoughts on why or how come that never
appealed to me?
Yeah.
Well, when I was 7 years old, I had to give a speech. I was in a Hebrew school, and they're having a consecration of my grade. They were coming in. They were being brought into the fold at this Friday night service. And I had to give a speech, which I practiced at home. I was so scared.
Wow.
I didn't see how I could get up on the stage and even open my mouth. And my brother Herb bribed me. You go up there and you do this, Helen, and I'll get you a doll. So Helen went up there and did it. I mean, the cost to be, my hair turned gray. I mean, it was so awful. And I have never, no matter how many times I've been up in front of a group of people and spoken, I have always hated it. So acting had absolutely no appeal to me.
But you probably didn't hate reading to kids.
No, that reading to kids, but talking to an audience of people, that was just way too much for me.
Okay, and well, maybe more on that in a little bit. But so let's try to advance through. So you from majoring in history and education, you did teach for a few years. That was kind of put you on stage a little bit. But you probably read to those kids. Maybe that was
I don't remember.
Yeah. And then you start teaching history of it. And then so that just talk about the period in your 20s, or basically the 1960s. So what can you say about what you were reading during those years? I mean, so I know a lot of personal stuff went on in your life during the 1960s. You know, you lost your father, you lost your first husband. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I must have read a lot, but I don't remember. I took a class at night down at the University of Chicago, because I still lived in Hyde Park, which is where the university was. I had this apartment. And with a couple of friends from my school, my little community college that I was teaching at, I took a course on Athens. And what it was a course on the Peloponnesian War, this book by Thucydides, which is just an absolute wealth of information about the Greeks and Socrates and Alcibiades. And who's Thucydides? No, it's not Thucydides. There's somebody who's the head of Athens, Pericles. That's right. That's the hero.
Okay.
Who's constantly being compared by the teacher to Lincoln. It was just but it was such a living class.
Huh.
Here are all these dead Greeks constantly referring to democracy in Greece, democracy in the United States. I mean, anyway, that was the kind of reading that I did for a while.
As a graduate student?
Then? No, I was teaching already.
Oh, you were teaching? Okay.
No, I was already teaching.
Okay.
So it was just, you could go audit classes. I don't know how much it cost to audit. You just sat in and listened to this guy whose name was David Green, who was a pig farmer in Ireland. But he was also an intellectual. He'd retired his pig farm. But he would fly in for these courses for 1 quarter or 2 quarters.
Okay. David Green, pig farmer from Iowa, but he taught some good.
He knew Greeks. What else? I mean, that must have been the year that I did. Those years must have been when I read Buddenbrook's Thomas Mann and Death in Venice. And who else? But that doesn't mean I didn't read a lot of junk at the time, too. I just can't remember the junk, which is the definition of junk, is the stuff you can't remember.
Huh. Not memorable.
That's right. Memorable.
But it's like, would there be a formula for the junk?
I don't think so. Whoever was writing big stuff, like David, what was his name? What's Roth's first name?
Philip
Roth, right. I mean, Philip Roth came out. He was teaching at the University of Chicago while I was there. Before he went to the Iowa workshop in Ames, Iowa, he taught. And a friend of mine had a mad crush on him, but he was only around briefly. But right after that, after I read Marjorie Morningstar, which was, I think, his first big successful book, he came out with a book whose name I'm not going to remember, but it was all took place in Hyde Park, which is where we were living. Now, there's nothing more exciting than to have a book about the corner that you're walking down, the street you're walking down, the tropical hut where we all ate dinner whenever we could afford it. I mean, it was just. I
think
great.
Jonathan Franzen had a book called Purity in Oakland.
Is that what
recently, or maybe it's just
Purity.
Purity. That's there's that one's kind of I relate to it there, but I would say Philip Roth is like Jonathan Franzen's I wouldn't think of as junk, you know.
Well, no, he wasn't junk, and but it was. He had this style, and Franzen has it too, though I don't know very much about Franzen.
Right.
But Philip was this sharp, tough Jewish kid, and it came through in every one of his books. He never let it drop. You know, his mother, his relationship to his mother. He was good.
Well,
and that was the year he published that. Those were the years that he published that book. What was the name of it? I'd have to go in the other room to look at it.
His most classic one or whatever.
Not classic. It's not the most. Well, that was a great book. American Pastoral was fantastic. But he wrote one about some. It reminded me a little bit of Catcher in the Rye. You know, Catcher in the Rye. Oh, I forgot that. I read that in high school for a book report.
Yeah.
And she didn't like that I read that book because it was a forbidden book and you weren't supposed to read that book.
Oh.
I still don't know why it was a forbidden book. I have to go back and read it again to find out why.
I mean, the kid was swearing a lot, I suppose.
I was wondering if it was masturbation. I just don't remember. But anyway, I mean, Roth wrote a book that was just filled with offensive stuff.
No, I think I know. I mean, it's also more of, I think it's a lot of maybe about masturbation and that also. I mean, I don't know. Is there some title of Roth's? I don't know. I have some vague association with what you're talking about there. With that there is a Roth book that is known for some kind of
known for something. Yes. Right.
I mean, not I mean.
And that was when I read Saul Bellows, a little bit of Saul Bellows. what's the one where it sees the day, and what was it? There were others.
I don't know if you chose a Saul Bellow. I should have it. I should have brought it prepared, like a list of the books we read in our family book club. But I'm sure you chose, or some one of us chose. There was we read a Saul Bellow book just 10 years ago.
Wasn't Henderson the Rain King?
It might have been Henderson the Rain King.
Can't remember what that was about, but I know I read it.
Same. Well, so, but that. Was anybody else like Philip Roth who was in your orbit like that, like at University of Chicago or out of University of Chicago, famous professor types? Okay, and Herbie Hancock would be another, person in your orbit that was famous. Yeah.
He went to college somewhere else, and I think he probably dropped out of college because who needs college if you're a musical genius?
Right. But then I guess the other question would be like if you developed an affinity for any era of fiction, like the Beats or the
Kerouac,
or American authors or European authors or authors translated or old, like the Thomas Mann is pretty old, right? Like
well, he died probably in the 60s. I went through a period, but that's because when I went back to graduate school after I'd been on teaching history for a while, I came back and did Russian history in graduate school. Got a PhD. I can't believe it in Russian history. But we did a lot of. I did Russian literature, and I read a lot of Russian literature. And you got to say, there isn't anybody who beats Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. There isn't anybody. I mean, I know Chekhov's a genius, and I know Gogol was a genius, but there's nothing like Fyodor Dostoevsky and Leo Tolstoy. They're amazing.
Did they cause you, were they the reason you chose Russian history?
I don't know why I chose it. I mean, subsequently I decided this was a huge mistake because guess what? I didn't speak Russian. I mean, I had to learn Russian. Learn Russian? Are you kidding? If I'd had German, it would have helped a little bit because they have a kind of typical language structure. They have all these different cases, instrumental, genitive, stuff like that. I didn't know from any of those. I had to learn all that stuff, and I didn't learn it. And the language was always just beyond me. No, and I didn't read them in Russian. I read them in English, but they were amazing. They were really amazing.
So that was a benefit of that choice of majors.
It was wonderful. It was just wonderful.
Maybe it was something about Nicholas and Alexandria that made you choose that?
No, Nicholas Alexandria. No, I mean, I think that I took a Russian history class one summer at the University of Chicago with some guy named Confino, who I'm sure is no longer alive. He was an Israeli guy who came and taught this class. And it's fascinating history. I mean, those people have been running around trying to find a government that could rule them with some kind of sensibility and sensitivity for decades, centuries, and they can't find it. And I was interested in the period before the revolution to see how it came to that. How did they come to Bolshevism? How did it come to communism? So I took classes on.
Well, and communism had a different. Well, I guess it was. And McCarthy was at work. What year was McCarthy doing the hearings for the Red Scare?
50 to 53.
And so that had already happened. No, he was on the scene and he was out. Okay. But then so communism had it was sort of a dirty word. I mean, what was the?
Well, it was a dirty word, but none of us at the University of Chicago believed it was a dirty word. We thought it was all ridiculous. We thought, they're in their country. We're over here. I don't see any communists around. Of course, there were communists around. It's stupid to think they weren't communists around. But I didn't know anybody who was a communist. Mm-hmm. All I knew was that my math teacher, my college math teacher, high school math teacher, lost his job because he wouldn't sign a loyalty oath.
Really? Wow.
And that made us very pro-communist.
Wow.
I don't think he was a communist. He had principles. I'm not.
That's incredible.
Know what I am. I'm an American citizen. I teach here, and I've been doing
I wonder what happened to him.
Well, he probably got a job somewhere else, not in California.
You mean not in Illinois?
Illinois, I meant Illinois.
Yeah,
right. He probably came to California.
Yeah, he probably did. Yeah. Huh. Okay, so did you read any? What about like dovetails with when I talked to Dad? Did you read any Marx or
we read Marx. We read
for one of those?
What's the easy one? There's one that was just on communism. It was a
The
very
Communist
short
Manifesto.
Book. That's it. We read the Communist Manifesto, and we read selections from Das Kapital. You know,
for your PhD or before that, you think?
Must have been for my PhD.
Okay.
I don't think they had. I can't remember if the thing on the Communist Manifesto was part of Western Civ. It could have been.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We had to read some Freud for the part of Western Civ, but we didn't read any Darwin. I mean, I always think of the big names of the 19th century were Marx, Darwin, and Freud. Right.
Yeah, I remember you reading a biography of Freud recently.
Yeah, I got into that for a while. I was looking to see what people said about Freud or how Freud affected them and stuff like
that. So you had sort of an appreciation for these. I wonder if it's like maybe it sort of develops with Dickens but like where you read classics that are these authors that are highly recommended and you check them out and you're like, yeah, the hype is true.
Yeah. Well, also I think that with Freud it's particularly interesting because I said Darwin, Marx, and Freud. Okay. Marx and Freud are both German. That's from my past. That's from where I come. Now, I don't know if Freud came from Vienna, or I think he may have come from some town outside of Austria. In Austria, but I mean, here come with a whole new system of understanding human behavior, and he's German, and he's writing about the people who so influenced our human behavior, like Hitler, or like Moses, or something like that. So I think that's what the fascination was a connection to my past, plus the interest in psychology, which was just much more prevalent in the 1950s and 60s than it is now.
Oh, yeah?
I think so.
Okay. You read any other psychologists?
Good question. I don't know. Lang, there was some guy named Lang in England who I read some case studies that he wrote. There may have been some others who I can't remember.
Okay. And what about, I'm curious about that, not pairing, but, association of Freud, Darwin, and Marx, because I don't know if I've ever heard those three together. Was it just, you think you saw them placed together in some other group, or did you just consciously place them together as maybe the three that you read the most of?
Well, I'm
sure
time. That I heard from others that those were the great minds of the 19th century.
Okay, all right.
I mean, did they live into the 20th century? Well, Freud did.
Freud did, right.
And I don't think Marx did, and I don't think Darwin did.
Right.
Though I don't know how long Darwin lived. But I mean, you think of the big theories that they come up with and nobody had ever thought of before. I mean, maybe people came close to Marx. It's possible. You have these other writers who were writing economic history. But, I mean, what they did is they just opened up whole new fields, and all of a sudden there were fields that had not been there before.
So, what's? I mean, I hear that you like Dostoevsky and you like Tolstoy. What do you like about them? I mean, what's so great about them?
I mean, you look at somebody like Dostoevsky. Okay, I mean, he was Freud before Freud was Freud.
Okay.
He looks at he has these characters who have these inner thoughts and inner passions that control them, and they know full well they shouldn't be controlled like that. You got to stop acting like that. I mean, this is in Crime and Punishment, where he kills this old lady. I mean, this guy who's an ordinary person. Now, why does he kill this old lady? What does it mean? Is it just a killing? Just a random killing? He wanted her money? I mean, it's fascinating,
Sure.
And then what's the other one that I like?
Well,
the Brothers K. I mean, my God, look at those different characters. Who was the good guy? It's not Asimov. I can't remember his name.
Isaac Asimov is a science fiction writer. No, I don't remember any character names from Karamazov.
Well, there was this boy who's practically an angel. I mean, he's practically an angel. He's so good. He's a representative of good. And then there's Ivan. He's not the representative of evil, but boy, is he confused.
Yeah.
He has all the passions there. Who are the others? Ivan.
But it's, yeah, I don't remember. I liked the book,
It's
but
time to read the book again.
maybe we could, if we want to reread a book together, that would be it. I think. I mean, I've heard so many. He's
amazing. And Tolstoy is incredible because here he is. Is he living at the same time? Yeah, he's living at the same time. Dostoevsky died in 1881.
It'd be interesting
Tolstoy lived a lot longer, lived till 19-something. And I don't think they ever met. I'm not sure. But I mean, here, he just writes these stories, this thing, War and People, forget War and Peace, what's the other one? Anna Karenina. I mean, it's this, 500-page, 600-page description of what life is like in Russia for the upper class or the almost upper class in the next, and just in bringing it together, you see the way people live and what was going on in their heads and how crazy. I mean, that one scene, there's this one scene on the battlefield during the Napoleonic Wars, and Pierre is there on the ground and he's been injured. And he looks around and what his picture of war and what war is in this war, it's unbelievable. But it's not done with that psychological stuff, but it's there anyway. What makes people behave the way they do, it's beautiful. It's just wonderful.
I mean, we're getting tired. We got a lot of. I mean, this is good stuff. Let's see. What? Let me ask like a couple more, but we can stop soon. Yeah. Go ahead. Should we take a break?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Well, let me ask. What do you think? Like, did you? I mentioned getting your thoughts about writers, and you went something like, "Oof," like writing. What is that about?
I'm not a good writer. It's very difficult for me. If I'm just writing off the top of my head, I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
If I have to write a letter for a certain purpose or write a description of something for a certain purpose, I can do it. But if I have to write a paper, it's just agony.
Mm-hmm.
And writing my dissertation was just agony. And when it hadn't been your father, I would never, if it hadn't been for your father's help, I would never have been able to do it. I'm just not a good writer. You are a good writer. He is a terrific writer. I am not a writer. And the ability to write, I think, is an incredible one.
But I guess so. That dissertation was in a way like it was a frustrating experience. What was the conclusion of that? Like, you wanted to find out what brought the Russians to that point where Bolshevism took over. What did you learn?
No, I didn't.
I know it was
not about the Bolsheviks at all.
But you mentioned when you were deciding how you decided to study that was an interest of yours.
It's fascinating because here's a whole country that has been ruled by this one family for many, many years, and ruled very, very badly. As a matter of fact, everybody would admit that they were a particularly dumb part of the ruling class at that time. I mean, they were related to Victoria, they were related to the German Kaisers, but they were stupid, and somehow there was no education came later to them. They didn't start getting educated in the Western way till the 18th century.
Okay.
Yeah, 18th century.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very thin upper class. And it was an upper class, half of which didn't want anybody else to be educated. They liked things just the way they were. And the story is always how the boyars, who are the aristocrats, how they would run these estates with these serfs who were basically their slaves. They'd be losing money and they had no idea. They didn't know they were losing money. There's no reason why they should know. They just went merrily on their way. Well, how can you have an upper class like that? And then you get this groups of people who start getting educated, who are horrified. They've got to fix things, and they have no power to fix things at all. The only way they can think of fixing is to leave the country, go to France, and be intellectuals there. I mean, it's a country that's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, you hear that even to like. What do you think about Russia today as it's evolved? Like, do you have a sense of it, or?
Well, I think that one of the reasons that they are not a democracy is because there's no history. It's very hard to put democracy in a place that's always had, a huge bureaucracy or a big upper class that tells you what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can try to do it, but it's very difficult. I'm trying to think of an example where, Russia shows it in the most extreme way. I mean, the patience that you need for democracy. I mean, you have to be willing to go through a lot of twists and turns and mistakes. I mean, look at us. Twists and turns and mistakes. And the scary thing is that we might lose it. Because we're not so sure it works anymore. Look what happened to poor Trump. He lost that election. And he won't admit it. And that's the exact thing that you can't have in it. One deal you have to make is you go by the results of the election. You don't do that. You don't have a minute. I'm glad I got that in there.
Like any authors that were politically influential to you, since you wanted to get into something about politics? What about any writers that were very influential that wrote about politics that were you connected with?
There's so many writers. I mean, I'm sure I don't even remember most of them. I mean, I read de Tocqueville at one point, and that was fascinating, just fascinating stuff. We had to read, and this is corny, but I mean, I think Lincoln is one of the most beautiful writers I've ever read. And it's only speeches. I mean, it's downright, diaries.
A memoir, yeah.
But just a brilliant man who really understood how the American system worked.
Writers from the Chicago Tribune?
No, nobody's from the Chicago Tribune. I heard they were just bought up by some big hedge fund.
Oh, yeah?
McCormick or Turner was great. That was the first one to own tonight.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I think people like, Martin Luther King.
Again, speeches.
Right.
What about? I mean, what if we just fast forward to things that you read in the 70s and 80s? Because as you moved to California, anything that you remember surprising you? Because I imagine in your early 30s and the early 70s, that's when you're reading Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. That's when you're in the that's when you're doing your graduate work. And then the late 70s is when you guys started you left Chicago. And do you remember any reading that was comforting to you when you were at Taiwan, Hong Kong for a year?
What I discovered in Hong Kong was what's that book about Japan, The Discovery of Japan?
Oh, I don't know, but I vaguely know.
Very long.
Yeah,
it was great. I loved it. But I don't remember what the name of it was.
Right, me neither. I'll try to link it if I figure it out, and I'll just double check with you later. Yeah.
Amazing.
Or I guess I try to prompt you with the idea of whether there's a formula to the junk stuff. They call it classified as junk. What I was getting at was
mysteries.
That's what I was.
It's taken me till now to get to the point that somewhere in the late 70s, early 70s, maybe in the late 60s, a friend of mine introduced me to mysteries. I had never read mysteries, I thought it was just fantastic. All of a sudden, first of all, there was Agatha Christie and Michael Innes and George Simenon. And those were those are like classics. Those are the ultimate of French, British, and American. I guess they were all British. Two are British and one is French. And then after that, there were all the rest of them. I mean, Hammett and Chandler. And that guy, Nicholas something. What was his name? He was Dutch. And then there were the Scandinavians. I mean, they're writing now. I mean, I just die over those. I really do.
So Agatha Christie was maybe one of the first then, huh,
yes,
for you?
Definitely one of the first.
Was she one of the first actually to start the genre? No, it's been going on for
Edgar Allan
longer
Poe,
than that.
and I'm sure.
Edgar Allan Poe. Okay.
And Sherlock Holmes. I mean, you mustn't forget Sherlock Holmes.
Did you read some Sherlock Conan Doyle?
I read Sherlock Holmes before I was into quote mysteries when I was younger.
Okay.
And I liked them, but it never occurred to me that there was a whole field out there for me.
Right. Right.
It's true. I forgot all about mysteries. Isn't that amazing?
Well, that and then you actually had a friend who was a mystery writer.
What do you mean is a mystery writer?
Okay.
I went to graduate school with Sarah Paretsky.
Uh-huh.
I did know no famous people. I was in a place where there were famous people. Hyde Park High School.
But you didn't talk to her much about her writing process or anything like that?
I haven't talked to her since she published her first book.
Oh, so when you knew her, she wasn't a mystery writer yet?
She was a graduate student in history.
Okay.
And the last time I saw her was at my wedding. She came to my wedding, and then we moved to Buffalo. And then she said, the cutest little gift for you when you were born. And you never met her, and I never saw her again. But she became famous.
Yeah. V.I. Warshawski.
That's it.
It's starring Kathleen Turner.
Oh, that's a movie.
I didn't see. Did you?
I think
you saw it?
Yeah.
Do you still read the New York Times book review?
Yes.
And what is that? What's the vibe you get from that? How are authors doing these days?
What I try to do is when there's a really good book review, I try and write down the name of the book and order it at the library, put it on reserve in the library. I'm so bad at this, So last week or something, I did a couple of books, three books. They all came in at the same time. They total like 1,500 pages. But I finished two of them. We're going to go for I'm in the middle of the third. So, yes, I love the New York Times. It's really good on introducing the book. But I never know which one is the one I want to read. I mean, I have to just read the description.
But they're new. This way, it keeps you reading new books as opposed to like classics all the time or whatever.
Yeah, I just read this book. It's his name, Verghese is his last name. But it's called The Covenant of Water. It was 700 pages long. It was absolutely one of the most wonderful things I've read in the last year. What was it? India. It's all about India. About a family in India. So I really like that. I like the idea of the saga from one generation to the next generation to the next generation, to see the family evolve.
I tend to think that wherever we get our news, it tends to be a lot of doom and gloom. But I wonder if fiction would you say your fiction, the books that are coming out like that you read, give you more hopeful? Like, can they be more hopeful, or are they? Do they tend to be more hopeful, or do you think they're
I think
not so much?
The Covenant of Water is more hopeful. I do. It's not always the case.
No.
I am now reading a book called A Paragon, but it's all about the Israeli-Palestinian war, and it's so far it's absolutely beautiful. It's like my poetry. It's one of the most depressing things I've ever read. So.
Beautiful and depressing. Interesting. What is your experience with Kindles or audiobooks?
I've never done an audiobook, and the reason for that is that I'm just not in one place long enough to do it. I mean, I could do it in here, I guess. I don't know how audio. You have to have a disc.
You
right,
put it in your earbuds. We'll get it streaming. We can fix that for you. We can try to do this, but
so I never do an audiobook. I used to use Kindle occasionally when I went away. I used to use Kindle when I went away, because I didn't have to carry books with me. I would carry. But something happened, and my Kindle isn't working now. So until I get it working again, I prefer to sit with a book. I really do. But that's because I'm old, and it's what I'm used to.
Yeah. Do you love bookstores?
I love bookstores.
Yeah. And libraries.
Yeah. Library. I want to put in a pitch. I think libraries are the most wonderful thing that was ever invented. I guess it was Ben Franklin, but I'm not sure. The idea in this country that you go into a library, you go into a place, and you get a book for free for 2-3 weeks. I mean, just think of it. Is there anything in this whole world that is like that? We have to be careful that they don't try to privatize libraries the way they privatize everything else.
While you're making your cases, what do you think of what's going on with banned books? What's the
Well, you could probably tell me what's going on with banned books.
No.
It's hard as a library. We used to have this thing called Banned Book Week in the fall, I think. And we would put out all the banned books that we had in the library so the kids could see them and take them out. They had things like, what was it? Oh, come on. To Kill a Mockingbird was on that list. James Baldwin was definitely on the list, but that's what I had a lot of kids in 8th grade. What else is on the list? There have to be others.
Well, I'm writing this book about, it's called How to Bomb a Building and, teaching children how to bomb buildings. What do you think about it? We would probably get on the list. Was that?
Are you asking me what I think?
No, I guess another way of asking the question is,
you can't.
Can you imagine? Like, is there ever could you ever see a case to ban a book?
I probably could.
Okay. So, and yet you'd say it's overdone. There are a lot of the idea with banned books is that there's people overdo it.
Last week, I believe, our ex-president made a little speech about how these foreigners are running into the country, ruining our blood type, making us weaker people. They're by just being here with us, or maybe even intermarrying, they're making us weaker people. And I'm Jewish, and that's what they used to say about the Jews. They were making these people weaker. So I think it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. If you ban something, let's ban him.
What? I wasn't ready for that topic switch from banning books to banning people.
You think that's so far away? You think that's so different?
Well, I've never heard of banning people. It's not on anybody's radar that I'm familiar with. I guess it would be a deportation list or something. Okay, well,
you gave me the mic, Buster. I wasn't born with a mic in my mouth.
Well, they're going to ban our podcast pretty soon because of the wild ideas we're throwing forth. But I appreciate the sentiment. And
I appreciate your questions and your willingness to deal with them.
Yeah. No, I mean, I thought it would be fun to talk books with you because I'm glad that I have a love of reading, and I think that's that you inculcated that in me, and I find
I forgot to mention when I was in high school I read The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, and like every 16-year-old at the time, I fell in love with Howard's work. He destroyed a building. What an idiot. I mean, she has the most ridiculous ideas I've ever heard, but I just love that book. And the message there is read everything.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's rare that somebody's going to write a book like I hypothetically imagined, like how to build a bomb and be a terrorist or something like that. For the most part, ideas should. So free speech. Free speech is an important value, we would say. And yeah, the First Amendment is a good amendment. Let's keep it. And writing is a wonderful activity where people are able to put these thoughts down on paper and
keep writing.
They should keep writing. So
yes, I should do.
Well, I've got some notes here. You've given me some good ideas that I'll try to find a lot of these books and link them, and I'll do a little transcript write-up of some of what we talked about. And we'll keep the discussion going. Maybe we can read the Brothers Karamazov together. And maybe some of our people watching want to join us. That'd be great if you could hit the like and subscribe button. Thanks a lot, Mom, for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
Love you.
You're a good interview.
All right.
Love you.
Thanks for watching. Bye.